Hi there. Welcome to this segment of Amazing Grays. My name is Ed Whitbred, and back with us today is Dr. Carl Savage, biblical archaeologist extraordinaire. Um, in his last visit, we talked a great deal about the nuts and bolts of being on a dig, how it happens, who's responsible for what. What I'd like to ask this time around, Carl, what is it physically like? Take it from the day you decide, I'm going to do this. You're sitting in your office there in New Jersey, and you see, I don't know, do you see a prospectus? Do you see, how do you get your information? Or at this point, are you going back? Take it as though you were brand new to it.
So the first thing you need to do is the license. So you know that ahead of time. So in order to do the license, you have to do the budget. So we talked about how are you funded. So you have to make sure you have enough money to make sure you have all the people you need. So you need supervisors that know their archaeology technique. You need the photographer, most important. You need other people in the background, like an artist to do drawings. We still do drawings of particular artifacts, and other people like that. And then you have to decide where are the volunteers going to stay. How much is it going to cost? What do we need to charge them for room and board, in a sense, to cover the expenses for that? So that's all you're doing before you get there. Then once you're there, and if you're part of the advanced team, which I always am nowadays, then you have to set up the site. And for Bethsaida, we're fortunate in that since we've been doing it year after year, we know the materials are there. We don't have to go and buy everything.
Let me jump in for a second. Is there a season that you are over there? I'm assuming you're not doing this in the snow. And they do get a little bit of snow on occasion on that part of the world.
Occasionally they do, yeah. So we have done, the main season is May to July. And the reason for that is that's when students and other people are available to come and dig. We have done some digs in the fall, not very often. And we've done a few winter, like January digs, where it's another time when some students can come because it's January break at their schools. The problem with the winter, even in the fall, is the rainy season begins October, November, and can continue into even to March. So that if it rains, you can't dig. At Bethsaida in particular, it becomes a mud puddle, and it just you can't dig. So the season is mainly from May to July. After July, even into July, it gets so hot that almost every year we'll have a day where you just can't work. It gets too hot too early.
Okay, I'm brand new. I'm just gotten off the plane. You have been there in front of me to set things up for my convenience. Somebody will meet me and tell me where to go, and what happens?
Right. So we have somebody meet our volunteers at the airport, and they're coming on all different flights. So may be sitting in the airport a couple hours before we actually.
Kind of like going on a bus tour.
We're going on a bus, and then we're going to drive to the place where you're staying. And during the drive, if I'm leading the volunteers, I'll point out some things that we're passing by, so you get your beginning. But most people are so tired, nothing's going to stay for that. So you wind up, for Bethsaida, the volunteers usually arrive at dinner time, they have dinner, they go to their rooms, and they sleep. And most of the time, the next day, we will go to the site, not to dig, but just to do the tour, because you're still getting acclimated to the time change and all that. Jet lag, yeah. So and we won't get up at dig time. We'll get up at normal breakfast, and after breakfast we'll go and then come back for lunch, to the place, and then you have the day free. Then the day after that is when the dig starts. So at Bethsaida, that means you're on the bus at 5:30. So that means you're getting up at 4.
Is there somebody who blows reveille, or?
No, well, we will chase you down if you don't show up on time, but no.
Which brings me to the question, where am I staying relative to the dig? Am I in a hotel, or am I in a kibbutz, or
We've at that
a
side
tent?
of, they've mostly, I mean, in the earliest days, they actually stayed at tents. This even predates me. I didn't join the group until 95. So they had been digging for a few years before that. But nowadays we stay at a kibbutz. It had been kibbutz Ginnisar, it's been kibbutz Hakok, and lately we're back to kibbutz Gadot, which is actually one of the earlier places that they stayed. So they're about 20 minutes away from the site.
Describe a kibbutz. I mean, that's a word a lot of people have no clue.
Yeah.
What
So
we're
kibbutz,
talking.
the kibbutz have changed over the years.
Yeah.
But it was basically a cooperative town. In the early days, they would share everything. Nobody owned the house they lived in. Earliest days, they didn't even own the clothes. There was like community clothes. You just picked out the right size for yourself and so forth. And you ate your meals in a dining hall, communal dining hall. There's not many kibbutzes that still operate the old way. A lot of them have begun to privatize things. So at Ginnisar, for example, the communal dining hall is almost never used now, maybe special occasions. But when we stayed at Godot, I'll mention that one since that's the latest one. You stay in their guest houses, which are little 2-room cottages, and normally it's normally double occupancy. So you'll have a roommate while you're there. You have your own shower, a little kitchenette, and a bedroom, and that's it. So that's where people stay, and it's air conditioned. So nowadays it's air conditioned. It wasn't always air conditioned in the beginning.
I can't imagine working in that part of the world without air conditioning, but
Right.
people did for thousands of years.
That they did.
It doesn't mean it's fun, but they did.
Yeah. So then, like I said, at 5:30, you'll meet the bus. You take about a 20-minute drive. And most of the time when I was a volunteer, before I became part of the administration, I would sleep during those 20 minutes that you get out to the site, as much as you can. Then as you arrive, you go immediately to the tool shed, get your tools for the day. You go to your square, you set up the tarp that each day that the supervisors originally set the tarp. So all you have to do is put the poles in the right spot each day. One day though, I came out, I sent everybody up to the hill and I had to get some stuff out of the office. And when I come up to the hill, they're all just sitting around and I go, well, what's the deal? Why don't you put the poles up? And they go, the poles have been stolen. So we had to go make some makeshift poles that day and buy new ones the next day.
People have no shame at all.
Yeah. I mean, they were aluminum pipes, so they were worth a little bit.
They had value to somebody.
Yeah. Anyway, so then you begin digging and you're assigned an area in the square or a task in the square. And that's what you do for hours.
When you say begin digging, that could be, I'm planting a rose bush out there, so I'm taking a shovel and shoving it into the ground and turning over 7 or 8 inches of dirt. You're not talking that.
No,
right?
so
what is the actual physical digging?
So I have a little.
What tools do you use?
Right. So I have a little. It's not quite a haiku, but a little poem that I say to the volunteers. You are the tide. The dirt is the water. Rocks remain. So you're just taking off a little bit.
I'm going to ask
you, and most of the time you're using.
Carl, I'm going to ask you to repeat that because there was a glitch in the transmission there for a second, right when you were in the middle of your haiku. So I'm going to ask you to repeat it.
So the little thing goes, you are the tide, The dirt is the water, the rocks remain. So that's the
Okay.
idea of just a little bit at a time. So the basic tools for most of the time you're digging is a trowel or a pick and a dust bucket. I mean, a dust, what do you call those? Dust pail,
Dustpan.
dust pan. Thank you. I
Dustpan.
don't know why I can't think of it. And
Welcome
then,
to my world.
the bucket that you're going to put the dirt in. Yeah. And the bucket that you're going to put your pottery in. And that's what you use most of the time. Sometimes we'll use slightly larger tools if we know that we're in say a fill area where it's just soil that's been dumped in, maybe even out of context. And you'll use a hoe and maybe a shovel, but hardly ever a shovel. Usually it's just a hoe. So you're still kind of pulling off a layer at a time as you're digging. Every once in a while, though, we'll get to a place where I know that what we have is like just stones falling down from walls from above. And so we need to get rid of this larger stones. So then I'll declare tsunami day. So we take out the bigger rocks. Yeah. And then we'll do, and when we have to do that, a lot of times we'll do a line, we call it the conga line, and you just hand the rocks down the road.
Okay.
So you're not having to carry them all the way. So that's, that's your.
I'm a volunteer, and I'm sitting and kind of brushing and moving stuff around and being careful not to break things. And something appears, a smooth surface, piece of ceramic, a piece of metal. And do I grab it and pull it out?
No.
Do I call somebody? Do I take a picture
call
of it?
somebody. So there may be a person who's like we call them senior diggers who's had some experience. Like Barry was a senior digger for quite a while, and you might call that person first, and they'll look at it. And if it's really something, then you call your supervisor. And if it's really, really something, then we call, they call me or they call Rami. I can remember that happened with a gold coin was found in my area. And it's one of the few ancient gold coins that we ever found. I say ancient because occasionally we'll find Islamic period coins that are very thin gold coins. But this was a big, heavy gold coin. It looked like it had Abraham Lincoln on one side because the emperor looked a little bit like Abraham. Yeah. And immediately, we had the whole crew show up, the chief archeologist, the photographer, and everything. So when you find something spectacular like that, the idea is don't pick it up, call. Last season that we dug, which is now 2019, because we didn't dig this year for obvious reasons, they found a bull-headed stele, and it was, I could hear the shout from where I was. It wasn't found in my area. I could hear the shout. So we went over to see what was going on because it was a spectacular find, And but the idea is, yeah, if you find something, and at Bethsaida in particular, if you find metal, don't touch it because it was a military outpost during the '67 war. And we still find some remnants of the munitions and so forth. And
might be a really bad surprise.
So there, we haven't found anything live in years, but
in years.
Well, yeah, we have had the 20, let's say it's almost 30 years ago, they would find some things that they would have to call in specialists just to be absolutely sure.
That kind of takes us in a slightly different direction, and I have no shame. You're spending a lot of your life in a part of the world that is the home for 3 different religions and probably 65 flavors in each religion, the various sects. And, I'm a Lutheran and you're a Methodist and you're a Roman Catholic, and we don't like each other all that much sometimes. And on top of that, it's a very volatile area politically. I mean, people get killed occasionally in that area from terrorists or just day-to-day life. Have you experienced, has that influenced any of the groups that you've been there? Is there any stories to tell there?
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So a couple times. The one that I remember most recently, we would hear the fighting on the Syrian border at Kenetra, which was in the news for a while. We were
Israel's not a large area
no,
to begin with.
it was 20 some miles away, or maybe even more. So we weren't really in danger from it, but we could hear occasionally the fighting that was going on the Syrian side of the border. One year, the year that the Hezbollah were shooting rockets into Israel, we had to send our volunteers home after that began. So
basically all the way back to the States.
all the way home, because the rockets, I mean, we could hear the rockets hitting. Again, this is a city far away from where we were, but we could hear the explosions almost every morning. They were shooting at Sfat, which is up on the heights above where we were. A couple rockets fell in Tiberias, which is a little south of us. In fact, one day, Richard Freund, who was one of the directors, and I were in Tiberias to pick up some supplies, and the air raid sirens started, and we could, and we got out in time. But what happened? One of the rockets fell near our favorite Chinese restaurant.
Oh dear!
And
now it's getting personal.
Blew out all the windows, and closed it down. So that year we sent all the volunteers home. Mahad Darashi, who was a Muslim archaeologist who was working with us bedside of that year, and I were the only two left. So we, because we sent all the volunteers home, but it was too expensive for us to change our tickets, to go back. So we stayed. And I remember she said, okay, it's enough being on the kibbutz every day. Let's go and visit she has family, and she's from a little town near Nazareth. So we traveled to Nazareth that day, and we went to her cousin's shop. I mean, I don't know how close cousin it was, but I mean, it was part of her extended family. And they were talking, and then we went out to lunch, and just as lunch finished, the air raid sirens started, and they were shooting rockets, not at Nazareth. Well, they may have been targeting that, but they weren't hitting Nazareth. They were hitting Afula, which is not far from Nazareth. So we actually saw one of the rockets explode in the sky. So I've been really close a lot of times.
I would think at that point I might think about coming home.
Well, early days when I was on a tour in Egypt, the police rioted and burnt down the hotel that I was staying at. So I always felt like, well, that's about as bad as it can get,
If it gets worse than that, you're probably not going to know it anyways.
Right.
How about languages? You're talking about all of these people on the dig, and they're not all from New Jersey, and they're not all from America. They're from Europe. They're from Asia, probably. Whatever. Is language a problem? Is there a common language?
The common language on the dig is English for the
Isn't
volunteers.
that convenient? Yeah.
Now we have people that can speak other languages. When I'm in Israel, my Hebrew gets quite a bit better than what it is right now. And so when like I mentioned, the antiquities authorities come, they say, do we need to speak English? And I say, probably not, so they do it in Hebrew. But we have people from all over. We have French and Spanish and, Portuguese, Australian. They speak a different English than we do. But there are people that can help if there's a language problem. I remember one year I had a Spanish archaeologist working with me, and she would ask me questions in Spanish, and I started answering her in Hebrew because my mind was saying that's a foreign language, and I understood what she said, but I was coming back in a different foreign language, and we had a laugh about that sometimes, you know.
That, that's kind of amazing when you stop and think about it, that you'll be able to do that and translate internally and respond differently and have her understand you. How long? You know, you said that this particular area, this particular tell, you began to explore it in the early 90s. Did I get that right?
Yeah, I think
Was
the
it
first year
long
was
before
actually 89 that they started.
89. Do you have any idea when that might be done? Is there an endpoint in that particular tell where you say we've learned as much as we're going to learn? Or
Yes
is
and
there
no.
always something on the other side?
I mean, we haven't had a license now for 2 years, and we may not be able to get a license.
Is that?
You know, because, well, we didn't apply for one for 2020.
Mhm.
So, and we haven't applied one for 2021 yet either, because it doesn't look like anybody's going to be digging this year either, unless we all get vaccinated before the summer. You know, it's just too dangerous that way this year. But even with that, the Antiquities Authority said, you know, you've been working this for 24 years now, or more. I've lost track, you know, but a long time. Maybe it's time to stop, publish what you have, and let somebody else pick it up maybe later, you know. And just in general, you don't dig everything. You leave it for the next generation of archaeologists, because techniques change quite a bit. Like I mentioned, all these XRF and ICP, and you could even add ground penetrating radar and electric resistivity tomography. All these new techniques are just really starting, and maybe the next generation of archaeologists will be much more up on that sort of thing. Another one is the graphic information systems, the idea of mapping everything on a GIS, in a GIS way, very precisely, can help you learn the XY relationships of everything that you found.
It sounds like technology is very much finding its way into your business.
Right.
I don't want to call it your business, your avocation, your passion.
Computers have changed a lot, especially with record.
Everything that we do. We're sitting here in two different cities. We could not have done this not that long ago. And talk about, does fakery still happen? I suspect that it's a little easier to pick up on now. But there's lots of stories about things that were made in New Jersey that ended up in a field in the Ukraine.
So there's even
sold back in New Jersey at a handsome profit.
So one time someone came to me with a shard they wanted me to authenticate. Okay, and it was a particular shard. It had, I don't know if you ever seen the symbol. It had like a Star of David, a cross, and a fish kind of thing.
Okay.
It was on a shard. You know, it was inscribed on a shard. And I looked at them and I said, I can't authenticate this. This is a body shard, and it could be scratched on at any point in the last 2,000 years. You know what I'm saying? That I couldn't tell just by looking at it when this image was put on this piece of pottery. Now, sometimes we can tell. We found an inscription one time, which was just 3 Hebrew letters, or Aramaic, it doesn't really matter in that time period, and a symbol. So it was a lamed, a shin, and a mem, and then an ankh-like symbol. Like, it wasn't an ankh, you know, which has kind of the oblong top, but it was a more rounded top with it looked like somewhat like an ankh. And it was found on a piece of 8th century BCE pottery. And the question was, well, when were these letters put in the pottery? And so you have to examine it closely. And because we had all the shards, in fact, the vessel was reconstructed, it was a pitcher. And you could tell that it was incised before it was fired. So there, the letters went with the pottery. And so you could date by the shape of the letters and by the type of pottery, and they matched closely enough. And so we found this thing that says, dedicated to the name of whatever the Ankh-like symbol god was. And it matches some of the dedicatory inscriptions that we find in other places. The lamed with the name of the deity afterwards, or the lamed and the name of a person afterwards, which means belonging to so-and-so. And so this was found in the ritual space around the gate and helped us to date the whole, confirm the dates of all the things that happened. So sometimes you can authenticate and sometimes you can't.
One last question that came to mind when you were talking a little bit earlier. You haven't been back to this, obviously, in 2000 and probably won't be in 2021. When you're involved in a tell and you've been working it for 5, 6, 8 years, are you automatically granted a license for the following year? Or is that a year by year?
It's a year by year. And most of the time, yes, you are granted an extension. You know, as long as your research project and you've been
You're not screwed up.
You don't have to fear that somebody else is going to come in and steal your site. And in fact, when you're done digging, you have the rule of thumb is you have 10 years where nobody else can dig unless they have your permission. In other words, they can't apply for a license unless you say, go ahead, you know.
Carl, it has been a hoot. I've thoroughly enjoyed this, and I hope that we can do it again sometime. We'll take a week or two off, and then maybe, because I've got 9 more questions here in my mind.
I'd be glad to, yeah.
We've pretty much run out of the allocated time. It has been a joy, and I thank you very much. And I'll give your regards to Barry. Ask him to tip a glass for you.
Okay.
Take care.
No, you too, Ed. Bye.